Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, today we are going to discuss Mauryan Empire. And when we try to understand the historical time frame, certain certain time frames, say either Mauryan, Magadhan Empire, or any other empire, there are a number of sources that compete with each other. So it's very difficult for a historian and for the student to understand the authenticity of the sources. So today our main focus would be to understand the different sources available for the study of Mauryan Empire, like archaeological sources, literary sources. We will try to understand what they say and how do we understand the authenticity of the sources, and how do we construct the whole story, what we know about the different aspects of the Mauryan Empire. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in a studio Dr. O.P. Singh. He teaches history in the Delhi College of Arts and Commerce in University of Delhi and has a specialization in ancient India. So I think his knowledge and experience will help us to understand this topic and give a kind of guidance how to construct the entire story of the Mauryan Empire, which we have come to know through the different sources available. So on behalf, I welcome him for the lecture.
Thank you, Amrinder ji, and good afternoon, viewers. It's a very pleasure to speak on a topic that is very close to my heart, and it's in fact very important phase in the history of ancient India, because this period witnesses for the first time emergence of an empire at a larger level. After the 16 Mahajanpadas, which were smaller political units, we have emergence of Magad as a supreme power in the entire North India, and ultimately it transforms itself into a very big empire which covered a very large area. Almost entire Indian subcontinent was a part of it. Now, to understand the different aspects of Mauryan period, whether society, economy, polity or political history, art, Asoka's Dhamma, it is very important to understand the sources on the basis of which the Mauryan history is reconstructed. We are in fact very fortunate enough to have a greater number of sources at our disposal as compared to earlier periods, and these sources can be categorized broadly into two categories: archaeological sources and literary sources. Now, as far as Mauryan period is concerned, we have a large number of inscriptions. Basically, these inscriptions were issued by Asoka, and they are spread almost all over India, covering from Afghanistan in the north to Karnataka in the south, and from Gujarat in the west to almost Bangladesh in the east. So in this area was basically, or rather can be considered to be under the control of the Mauryas, though there are certain debates on the use of the term of empire. But nevertheless, generally speaking, we consider that the areas from which these inscriptions have been found were part of Mauryan Empire. Now, another interesting aspect about Asokan inscriptions or Mauryan inscriptions is that these are the first evidence of writing in ancient India. Prior to it, we do not have any evidence of writing in India. So this can be said with certainty that at least during Mauryan times the people were literate, because these inscriptions were in fact a product of literate people. Now, as far as these inscriptions are concerned, these inscriptions were mostly written in Prakrit language with Brahmi script, but in certain areas different language and script have also been used. For example, as far as northwest India is concerned, there we have use of Kharoshthi script, and at the same time in western India we have Greek and Aramaic script as well. Now, the reason for it that this area was earlier under the control of Greeks, who came along with Alexander and settled down in this area. So they were familiar with the Kharoshthi Greek and Aramaic scripts. That is why this area do not have inscriptions in Brahmi, but rather in Kharoshthi and Aramaic, to make people understand the message of the king. Now, as it is suggested that Ashokan inscriptions are basically edicts. Edicts are basically orders of the kings. So these inscriptions are in the form of orders which were issued by Ashoka from time to time. And these inscriptions, as said, were in Brahmi, which was first deciphered by a British official called James Prinsep in 1837, and after that, it was only after that that it could become known to us that Mauryan Empire was such a big empire and Ashoka was such a great ruler. So let us see the sources. First of all, we shall discuss the inscriptional sources, and then we shall talk about the literary sources. Now, Ashokan inscriptions are classified into major rock edicts, minor rock edicts, pillar edicts, and then there are certain other inscriptions which have been issued from time to time, and not necessarily by Ashoka only, because in other category we have some inscriptions that were also issued by Chandragupta Maurya as well, or at least during the reign of Chandragupta Maurya as well. Now, these major rock edicts are found from 8 sites. These are 14 in number, so that means that from these 8 places we have 14 inscriptions at each place, and the places can be seen at the screen, included Kalsi, Mansera, Sahbajgadi, Girnar, Sopara, Yerragudi, Dhauli or Tosli, and Jogada, which is also known as Sambapa. Now, you can see that these inscriptions are spread over almost all over the country, and they have certain significance about which we shall talk right now. Then the another category of inscriptions or edicts is minor rock edicts, which have been found at 13 places or 13 sites, and again the sites are Aharora, Bairat, Brahmagiri, Gujjara, Gavimat, Jatingarameswar, Maski, Palki Gundu, Rajula Mandagiri, Rupnath, Sahasaram, Siddhpur, and Yerragudi. Now, here it is interesting to see that Yerragudi has both minor and major rock edicts. So, this is one aspect that is quite interesting to see. Now, apart from it, there are pillar edicts, and these pillar edicts have been found at 7 sites. The names are Allahabad, Delhi Topra, Delhi Meerut, because these are now located in Delhi, which were brought by Firoz Shah Tughlaq from different places and installed in Delhi. So they are called Delhi Topra, Delhi Meerut. Then we have Lauria Ariraj, we have Lauria Nandangarh, we have Rampurwa and Vaisali. Now, these pillar edicts are basically specimens of very good specimen of Mauryan art, and they are considered to be the masterpieces of Mauryan art. But here we are looking at them from the point of view of inscriptions. Now, other inscriptions apart from these inscriptions which were especially issued by Ashoka, or at least issued during the reign of Ashoka, we have certain other inscriptions which have been found from Barabar caves, Rumindei, Nigali Sagar, Allahabad, Sanchi, Sarnath, Bairat, Kandhar, Lamghan, Sahgaura, Mahasthan, Nagarjuni Hills, and Junagadh. Now, if we try to look at the significance of these inscriptions from the point of view of source of history, then it can be broadly suggested that the 14 major rock edicts are basically related to the concept of Dhamma that was propagated by Asoka, because in the major rock edicts, Asoka basically deals with his ideas, policies and principles of Dhamma, which was propagated, which was started by Asoka, and thus it can be suggested that major rock edicts are basically related to Asoka Dhamma. Now, as far as minor rock edicts are concerned, minor rock edicts are on personal history of Asoka, and in a few inscriptions we can also find the summary of Dhamma, whereas in major rock edicts we can find the details of the Dhamma, and in minor rock edicts one can find summary of Dhamma, because Dhamma was very important for Asoka because of a number of political and social reasons, and that is why his focus was very much on propagation of Dhamma and principles of Dhamma. That is why the bigger inscriptions are related to Dhamma only. Now, as far as pillar edicts are concerned, this can be suggested, it can be considered as appendix to the rock edicts, appendix to both the rock edicts, both major as well as minor, because those informations which could not be included in major or minor records, or at a later stage when the emperor thought it necessary to be included, to be spread among the masses, he came out with those pillar edicts, and these pillar edicts have informations which are not there in minor and major rock edicts. Then apart from these inscriptions, we have some other archaeological sources as well which belong to Mauryan times, and they also throw very important and welcome light on the economic condition of the Mauryan period. Among them, one can talk about the punch marked coins, especially the silver coins, silver punch marked coins. Then there are certain silver bar coins also belonging to the period of the Mauryas, but the coins, as far as punch marked coins are concerned, we have mostly silver punch marked coins that come from the period of, that come from the time of the Mauryas. Apart from silver punch mark coins, we have some pottery remains which include rather red ware, black ware, grey ware from all over the empire. But the most important pottery that is recovered from Mauryan period from the entire North India is called NBPW, Northern Black Polished Ware, which was a kind of deluxe pottery, which was pottery that is specific to Mauryan period, because some certain site produces NBPW, then it can be said with certainty that this site belongs to Mauryan period. So these are some of the archaeological sources on the basis of which one can understand, one can try to understand, or rather the history of Mauryan period has been constructed. Now these informations are supplemented or cross-checked with certain other sources, among which the literary sources are very important. Now literary sources again can be classified into two categories, the religious literature and the secular literature. Now as far as religious literature is concerned, the Puranas are a very important Brahmanical literature which provide the list and chronology of the Mauryan kings, because the list and the chronology of the Mauryan kings mostly comes from the Puranas, though it can be cross-checked with certain other sources as well, but generally the chronological order and the entire list of Mauryan rulers is derived from Puranas only. Then apart from these Brahmanical sources, Puranas, various Puranas are there. Apart from these Brahmanical sources, there are mostly Buddhist sources which provide lot of information about the Mauryan history. And among these sources, one can talk about the Jataka stories, which in fact provide a source, the they provide a very important picture, they provide a very balanced picture of the socio-economic condition of the Mauryan period. Then we have a Buddhist text which is basically a commentary of another Buddhist text called Mahavansa. This commentary is called Vansat Pakasini, and this text talks about the origin of the Mauryas. Now, as far as the origin of the Mauryas is concerned, the Puranas also throw some light on the origin of the Mauryas, whereas the Puranas say that the Mauryas were Sudras, and on the other hand, the Buddhist sources suggest that the Mauryas were Kshatriyas. But then this conflict has always been there, because Asoka, being a patron of Buddhism, was not liked by the Brahmanas, and that is why they have tried to show the origin of Asoka, or rather Mauryas, from lower castes, whereas because of the patronization provided by the Mauryan rulers, especially by Asoka, to the Buddhists, has forced them to accord them a higher status, and they have suggested that the Mauryas were Kshatriyas. Now, as far if we look at Junagadh inscription, Junagadh rock edicts suggest that Mauryas were Vaisyas in fact, but again this is not very certain, it's just an speculation. Then the famous commentator on Mudra Rakshas, Dhundiraj, he says that Chandragupta Maurya was the grandson of Mura, who was either a Dasi or a queen at the court of the Nanda. He is again not very certain about it. So, nevertheless, as far as this conflict has always been there between the Brahmanical sources and the Buddhist or non-Brahmanical sources, because Brahmanical sources have projected the Mauryas to belong to the lower caste, the Buddhist sources have naturally suggested that they belong to the Kshatriya caste. Then apart from it, there is another Buddhist text called Deepvans, and still another text called Mahavans. These two texts talk about the role of Asoka in the spread of Buddhism in Ceylon, because Ceylon nowadays is a predominantly Buddhist country. There the credit of spreading this religion goes to Asoka, and this information comes to us from Deepvans and Mahavans. Now, still another Buddhist text, Divyavadan, talks about the contribution of Asoka in the overall development of Buddhism in the country, and so on and so forth. Now, Parishishta Parvam, which is a Jaina text, it talks about the conversion of Chandragupta Maurya to Jainism. Chandragupta Maurya is said to have adopted Jainism at the later stage of his life and migrated to South India in Shravanbelagola, where he committed Salekhana along with Bhadrabahu. So, this information basically comes from Parishishta Parvam, which is an important Jain text that throws welcome light on the history of the Mauryas. Then the another category of literature is secular literature, and this includes the very famous Arthashastra by Kautilya or Chanakya or Vishnugupta, as he is known by various names. So, Kautilya's Arthashastra is a very important text. Then we have Indica by Megasthenes. Then we have another Buddhist text, Mahavansa, and we also have an important play by Visakhadat. It's called Mudra Rakshas. Now, let us have some discussion in detail about these sources. Now, Kautilya is the author of Arthashastra, and Kautilya is also equated with Chanakya, who was the mentor of Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan dynasty. Now, if we accept Chandragupta, if we accept Chanakya to be the mentor of Chandragupta Maurya who founded the Mauryan dynasty, and if he is the same person who is also known as Kautilya or Vishnugupta who authored the text called Arthashastra, then we can, on the face of it, we can generally accept that whatever information is there in the Kautilya's Arthashastra is accurate, because it was written by the person who was guiding the king in his day-to-day affairs. Now, Arthashastra is basically a treatise on statecraft. It's not a text on economics, rather it's a treatise, a text on statecraft, art of governance, art of a state control, art of handling the state. So, basically here we have various components, that what should be the component of a state, what should be the qualities of the ruler, what should be the qualities of the ministers and officials, how ministers should be appointed, how officials should be appointed, how much tax should be levied upon, and so on and so forth. So, it is basically a text on what you call governance, and if it was written by Chanakya, who was the mentor of Chandragupta Maurya, then on face of it, it can be said to be very reliable text. But in recent times, certain studies have come out which suggest, especially the studies by Trotman and all, which suggest that in fact this text is not written by one person. Because going by the style of writing and the use of phrases, words, punctuations, etc., etc., we find 7 different styles of writing in Arthashastra. So, it has been suggested that Arthashastra was not written by one person, rather it was written by at least 7 persons. So, the natural question arises that whether can we use Arthashastra as a source of Mauryan history or not, or whether the information provided in the Arthashastra reflect the reality of Mauryan times or not, because the historians of earlier generation, and in fact some of the mainstream historians as well, have completely relied on Arthashastra for writing the history of Mauryan dynasty. Now, because of these questions, there are, apart from these questions, there are a number of other informations that, interesting aspects of Arthashastra that one can discuss, is that in the entire Arthashastra, Chanakya does not talk about his patron Chandragupta. In the entire Arthashastra, Chanakya talks about the state, talks about the capital, but he does not talk about Patliputra or Magad. Some other inferences can also be seen from the fact that in one of the chapters, there is reference of Chinese silk also in Kautilya's Arthashastra. Now, we all know that Chinese silk came to India in post-Mauryan times, when the route to Central Asia was opened up after the decline of the Mauryas with the coming of the foreigners, especially the Sakas and Kusanas. So, it was only during post-Mauryan times that we have Chinese silk in India, but it finds mention in Kautilya's Arthashastra as well. So, these issues raise doubt in the mind of an ordinary reader that whether Arthashastra reflects the reality of the Mauryan period or not. And the general consensus amongst historians is that it is not the entire Arthashastra, but certain parts of Arthashastra of course are related to Mauryan period, and those books, those chapters in fact reflect the reality of Mauryan period. Then we have Megasthenes Indica. Indica is a text that was written by Megasthenes. Megasthenes was the ambassador of Seleucus Nicator at the court of Chandragupta Maurya in Patliputra. He stayed in Patliputra for 5 years, and he has written his memoirs, whatever he saw in the Patliputra or in its environs. He has written in a text called Indica. Again, on the face of it, since it was written by a foreigner which was neutral to Indian perspective, so it can be said to be an unbiased source of information for Mauryan period, because he stayed there in the capital, he was there in the court for 5 years, and whatever he saw he has written. So, it can be said to be an unbiased record of Mauryan times. But again, the same problem, not the same problem, but again there are certain problems with Megasthenes Indica as well. The first problem with Megasthenes Indica is that this text is not available in its original form. What we have today is in fact excerpts by various later writers such as Strabo and Arrian, who have used Megasthenes Indica in their own writings, and they have quoted from Megasthenes. It's not that the original text of Megasthenes is available. The text, the book, the informations available in Indica are available in the form of quotations of later writers. So, the first problem with Megasthenes Indica, that the book itself is not available. Then there are certain problems also. For example, when Megasthenes talks about Indian society, he classifies the Indian society into 7 categories. Now, this is a classification that is a functional classification of the society, and it had been classified on the basis of occupation. Now, such classification of society was prevalent there in Greco-Roman world, but not in India, because all of us know that Indian society was based on the basis of Varna, and it was not based on the basis of occupation. And even if we accept it to certain extent, then still we do not find any reference of merchants in this classification. The 7 categories that Megasthenes talks about, that we shall discuss when we discuss the society in detail, but here we are discussing the limitations of Megasthenes, and he does not talk about the merchants, because he was living in Patliputra. Patliputra was a very important center of trade, still he did not come across merchants. This is something that one cannot believe upon. Then he also talks about absence of slavery in Indian society, whereas we know that Indian society, there was slavery in Indian society, because Kautilya talks about it. Kautilya talks about it, that how a person can be enslaved and how a person can be manumitted. Now, how many types of slaves can be there, because he talks about Dandadas, and then he talks about Ahitak. Now, those who have been enslaved because of punishment, as a result of punishment, or those slaves which are harmless. Now, such references in other sources are there which suggest that Indian society, there was slavery in Indian society. But Megasthenes says that there was no slavery in Indian society. Again, the reference point of Megasthenes is Greco-Roman world. The condition of a slave was very miserable in Greco-Roman world, and since he did not see such a miserable condition of a class of people, slaves, in India, so he thought that there was no slavery in India. In fact, in India the slaves were like member of the household, and they, of course, they did not enjoy economic and political right, but they remain in the family as a member. So, such informations obtained from Megasthenes Indica is again something that though generally one can expect it to be a neutral, unbiased record of the past, but such problems have created such problems have been created in the case of Megasthenes as well. And again, even Megasthenes Indica cannot be accepted on its face value. Again, nevertheless, this does not mean that these texts were useless. It does not minimize or reduce the significance of either Kautilya's Arthashastra or Megasthenes Indica, because these are very important sources, because certain sources are there, certain informations are there which are cross checked, which are found to be true, and which are very significant as well. Then we have this Buddhist text called Mahavans. Mahavans in fact very clearly mentions that Chanakya was the minister of Chandragupta Maurya. So, this certainty that Chanakya was minister of Chandragupta Maurya also is established by this text called Mahavans, which is a Buddhist text. Then we have very important historical play, though it was not written during Mauryan times, it was written during Gupta period, but it is a very important play written by Vishakha Dutt. The play is called Mudra Rakshas, and this is a historical play which shows that how the camp of Chandragupta Maurya led by its mentor Chanakya and the camp of Dhananand led by its mentor, his name was Rakshas, how these two camps were competing with each other, how they were making plotting and counter plotting against each other, how some design or conspiracy was created by Chanakya and how it was diffused by Rakshas, and ultimately how Rakshas accepts the defeat at the hand of Chanakya. So, though it is a historical play, but there are certain important informations, and this text is also used as a very important source of information for Mauryan period. So, these are basically our archaeological and literary sources which are very significant in the reconstruction of the history of the Mauryas, and based on these sources we can talk about the early history of the Mauryan rulers, beginning with Chandragupta Maurya, who ruled between 321 BC to 297 BC, and he was crowned in 321. Now, the Jain text Parishisht Parvam says that famous story of a mother scolding her child to eat the khichdi not from the center but from the fringes, because the center is very hot. This story basically we have heard about Chandragupta Maurya. This story is also there in Parishisht Parvam. Now, he concluded a treaty with Seleucus in northwest India, and certain exchanges were made after the end of this treaty, and a matrimonial alliance also took place. We do not know who married whose daughter, but a matrimonial alliance is also said to have taken place. Now, at the end of his reign, he abdicated the throne in favor of his son Simha Sen, and he went to Shravanbelagola along with Bhadrabahu, and he performed there Sallekhana, or the typical Jain style of death. Now, these two inscriptions that we were talking about in the category of other inscriptions, which come from Sahagaura and Mahasthan, basically these two inscriptions talk about the measures adopted during the reign of Chandragupta Maurya when this famine took place, because it was during this famine only that Chandragupta Maurya abdicated the throne. But he also took certain measures, and these informations are there in Sahagaura and Mahasthan inscription. Then he is succeeded by his son called Bindusar, more popularly known as Bindusar, who ruled between 297 BC to 272 BC. Now, this gentleman Bindusar is known as Simha Sen in Jain tradition. According to the Greek writers, he is called Amitrokets. Strabo calls him Amitrokets, and this is basically a version, a Greek version of the Sanskritized words Amitraghat or Amitraghad, which literally means the eater of foes or the destroyer of foes. Then Lama Taranath says that he conquered the 16 states of North India, and he conquered the region between the two seas, the eastern seas and the western seas. He probably had also his control up to Mysore, and he had relations with various foreign rulers as well. Now, Divyavadan says, Divyavadan is a very famous Buddhist text, it says that he wanted to nominate his eldest son was Susim or Suman as his successor, but his ministers preferred Asoka and not Susim. So, the next ruler after his death in 272 becomes Asoka, who ruled from 268 to 232 BC. Now, there is an interregnum of 4 years which in fact which were lost in power struggle amongst the various brothers of Asoka. Now, prior to being appointed as the viceroy, prior to being appointed as the ruler of Mauryan dynasty, Asoka had been viceroy of two very important states of Mauryan period. There were 4 states or provinces in Mauryan empire, and he had been the viceroy of 2 states, and these 2 states are very important from the point of view of administration. These were at Takshashila and Ujjaini. Takshashila was the capital of northern province and Ujjaini was the capital of western province. And these 2 provinces have been very significant because of a number of disturbances and foreign invasions or threat of foreign invasions which generally took place from these areas. And he had control, Asoka had controlled these areas very efficiently, and he quelled those rebellions also in those areas. So, as we said that Bindusara died 272 BC and Asoka succeeded 268 BC. So, the 4 years were lost in power struggle, and we have heard this famous story where Asoka is said to have killed his 99 brothers, sparing the youngest one. His name was Tissa. Now, this story in fact is narrated in the Buddhist text Mahavamsa. Now, Radhagupta was one of his ministers who was also a minister of Chandragupta Maurya, and Radhagupta is said to have supported Asoka in his endeavor to become the ruler of the Mauryan dynasty. Now, as far as Asoka's inscriptions are concerned, we have just now seen that so many inscriptions were issued by Asoka, edicts were issued by Asoka, and they are spread all over the country, but only 2 inscriptions, one coming from Maski and the other coming from Gujarat. These are the only 2 inscriptions or edicts which mention Asoka by name. The name Asoka is mentioned in only these 2 inscriptions. Now, otherwise he is generally mentioned as Raja Magdhe or the king of Magad. Then talking about a few important incidents of the life of Asoka, one can discuss about the war with Kalinga, which was a very significant event of the life of Asoka. This war was fought in 260 BC, and going by Bhabru edict, it says that after the end of this war, after 2.5 years, after the 2.5 years of the end of this war, Asoka became a supporter of Buddhism. So, there is a general perception that Asoka became a Buddhist just after the end of Kalinga war, because he was very appalled by the scenes of the war, and he wanted he did not want any bloodshed in his country, in his kingdom. So, he adopted Buddhism, but it's not the fact. The fact is that he becomes a Buddhist after 2.5 years of the end of Kalinga war. Now, Asoka is also credited with establishing the city of Srinagar. Modern Srinagar in Kashmir was probably established by Asoka, because this is an information that comes from the contemporary sources. And his son and daughter Mahendra and Sanghamitra went to Ceylon as the missionaries of Buddhism, and they spread Buddhism in Sri Lanka. Now, one of Asoka's daughter is also said to have married a noble from Nepal, so he had also relationship in that part of the country as well. So, this apart from it, if we look at later Mauryas, the rulers who ruled after Asoka, the later Mauryas are said to have ruled between 232 to 184 BC. So, this dynasty lasted for almost 197 years. Of this 197 years, 90 years are devoted to the first 3 kings, Chandragupta Maurya, Bindusara and Asoka, and rest 47 years were ruled by other rulers who came after Ashoka. Now, after Ashoka's death, the empire was divided into two parts. The eastern part went under Dasrath, his grandson Dasrath, and the western part went under Kunal, his son. First it was under the control of Kunal, and then it went under the control of Samprati, and the eastern part went under the control of his grandson Dasrath. But later Samprati also acquired eastern part because western area was threatened because of Indo-Greek invasions and even Satavahanas. Then this gentleman Samprati was succeeded by Salisuk, who was further succeeded by Devvarman. Devvarman was succeeded by Satdharman, and Satdharman was succeeded by Brihadrath, who was the last ruler of this dynasty, who was murdered by his own general Pushyamitra Song, who killed him in killed him in one of the parades that was being conducted in the capital only, and Pushyamitra Song founded this dynasty. So this is broadly political history of Mauryan period, derived or based on the sources that we discussed right now. But more importantly, the issues of society, economy, polity and administration will be discussed in the further lectures. So thank you very much.
There are two questions generally asked while talking about the sources of Mauryan Empire. One is to describe the different sources that are available for the constructing a story of Mauryan Empire. The other is illustrate the sources. So, tackling these two questions, what is the different point that one a student should write, or what are the things while question is asked to illustrate it, what the point need to be discussed?
You see, these are different phrases. I mean, the point is that describe or illustrate is almost same thing. Now, if this is different from evaluate, because when one is asked to evaluate, one is supposed to give some critical remarks about the informations obtained during the reading, his or her reading, whatever the students read. What are the critical observations of the student himself or herself? One can write when there is a question asking to analyze it. But otherwise, describing or illustrating is just giving the information obtained from the books.
Okay, and when asked to evaluate the sources, then he can have a space to
critically analyze.
What is the space to critically analyze? They can check the veracity or the authenticity. How can they tackle these different sources? Because those are the historical, they can't have the primary exposure.
At graduation level, one cannot expect them to be as critical as we understand.
Okay.
But still, reading good history textbooks definitely provides some information where a student can familiarize oneself with the art of critical evaluation and analysis.
Okay. So, these are the sources as we find the literary sources and archaeological research. Suppose in conflict, two sources conflict the same facts, how one can reach to conclusion?
Yes, in case of such a conflict, because sources should generally complement each other.
Right.
If there is one information coming from one source and the same information comes from another source, then we generally take it to be a true event of the past.
Okay.
A genuine event of the past. But if there is a conflict between two sources, then generally we accept archaeological sources to be more authentic than literary sources, because in literature there is, I mean,
a scope elaborate.
Yes, if we look at ancient Indian literary tradition, we have evidence of interpolation in the literature. Interpolation, that is things being added at a later date. The very good example of interpolation is Mahabharata.
Okay.
Rig Veda. Rig Veda today consists of 10 mandalas, but actually only 7 mandalas were composed during Rigvedic period. Other mandalas, other 3 mandalas were added to it during later Vedic times.
We will discuss it, but before that we take up the question from Odisha. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Before that, we take up the question from Odisha. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question. Sir.
Yeah, go ahead. Please ask your question.
Was there any worthy activity in the Mauryan time?
Firstly, reduce the volume of the television, then ask your question.
Sir,
Yeah.
Mauryan territory, worthy activity was there or not?
Which one?
He is asking about some activity.
Yeah.
Not clear.
Not
which,
clear.
Not
Yeah,
which
yeah.
activity he is asking for.
Okay, I think not disconnected. So we were talking about the contrary sources, and when there are contrary between literary and archaeology sources, the archaeology sources will be
we take archaeological sources to be more reliable.
More
than
reliable.
Literary sources.
okay. And what about these a story or the other narrative which we find in different at different places? Do they, of course, they help in forming the putting it together.
Finer details of various aspects, of course, yes.
But
then
what about its veracity?
there are so many stories that cannot be verified.
So how historians
still-
tackle this?
No, a historian should, or rather does, work only on the basis of evidence.
Okay.
Because if there is no evidence, it is not history. It will become fiction.
Okay.
So a historian should always.
So these stories, these sort of stories, you are saying, how do
They can be
how does they
used to
take
make.
help? Yeah.
They can be used to make the reading or the lecture more interesting,
Okay.
but they cannot be treated as reliable source of history.
Okay. So if that story is corroborated by the literary other sources, then we can take it.
Then it becomes important.
Can you
Then it becomes
explain
important.
through
and
the example?
it can be
Do we
taken
have
to
some
be an
examples?
event of past.
Do we have some examples like this?
Don't know, but you see, this various story I was right now talking about, that once Chandragupta Maurya, when he was a child, his mother scolded him not to eat the khichdi that she had served for him from the center, because the center is hot. And one should eat from the sides.
Right.
So that story is also there in a contemporary source.
Okay, we have another
Mahavans.
We have another caller call from Uttarakhand.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Sir, good morning. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. सवाल पूछिए.
Sir, I want to. What is the importance of Mauryan dynasty?
Importance of?
Mauryan dynasty.
Okay, importance of Mauryan dynasty.
Importance ki,
This
to
is-
talk about importance, then this was the first major empire of ancient Indian history. Rather, this was first major empire of Indian history, because prior to it we have Mahajanpadas, which were smaller states.
They are divided in 16
16
Mahajanpadas.
Mahajanpadas, which were very smaller states. They were
So
states
kind
in-
of unified.
Yeah. So this is first attempt by the dynasty to bring entire territory under one rule,
Right.
where
Unification.
they tried to provide uniformity in administration and all the aspects. Now, whether they succeeded or not, it's a different matter.
At least
And
laid the foundation.
That's a matter of debate.
Okay.
But this is for the first time that large part of India and even beyond India, the regions which are now part of Pakistan and Bangladesh and even Afghanistan, were probably under the control of the Mauryas.
Okay. So at least two important milestone important.
Then no, apart from it,
yeah.
here you have a beginning of bureaucratic system of administration, because they Mauryas maintained the largest bureaucracy, very vast network of bureaucracy. They laid the foundation of road works and networks which connected the entire country, which further facilitated administration and trade and all.
Then
Mauryas were also the first rulers who brought for the first time the art into the public sphere.
Okay.
The pillars of Mauryas, especially Asokan pillars found from different places, they are very good specimens of Indian art.
Okay, we have another call from Uttar Pradesh. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Yes, sir. So my question is, how Mauryan Empire flourished around the world, and what was the role of Mauryan Empire to flourish religion around the world?
Role of Mauryan Empire?
So can I repeat my question?
Yeah, please reduce your television volume, then ask question. Only then we can hear your voice. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir, how Mauryan Empire flourished around the world, and what was the role of Mauryan Empire to flourish religion around the world?
Okay, how Mauryan Empire flourished and what was the region of flourishing around the world?
I don't know what he means by flourishing around the world, but definitely the Mauryan rulers had contact with various foreign rulers, various foreign states, especially if we look during the reign of Bindusar. Bindusar is said to have a relationship with the Seleucid king of Syria. He also who sent his emissary, famous emissary Demyacus, to the court of Chandragupta Maurya. Then if we look at Asoka reign, he was in relationship with the rulers of this gentleman Antiochus. Antiochus is the ruler who was from Syria. Then he was also in relation with Ptolemy of Philadelphus of Egypt. So he had maintained his relationship with a number of foreign rulers. So this way his foreign policy can be said to be very successful.
And trade was also,
because during this reign we do not find any invasion. No, there were further invasions, but during the reign of Asoka.
Apart from that, the Mauryan Empire also have trade relationship with other countries.
No,
Central
trade with the
Central Asia.
Central Asia or Western world was not very much during Mauryan times. It's a phenomena of post-Mauryan period.
Okay.
But nevertheless, Asoka maintained his relationship with a number of foreign rulers, especially in West Asia and Central Asia.
We have another call from Karnataka. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, please ask your question.
Sir, I have one question about, I want more information about northern black whale culture, sir.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Sir, northern black whale culture, sir. NWB.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have one more question, sir. What is the importance of Buddhist text Mahavagga, sir?
Okay, Buddhist text Mahavagga.
Mahavagga is also a contemporary Buddhist text, which also gives some information about Mauryan period. There are so many Buddhist texts that can be used from the point of view of source. But as far as her question about NBPW is concerned, basically NBPW is a pottery culture which is typical of Mauryan period. Now there were so many pottery cultures which included grey ware, black ware, even red ware. But NBPW or Northern Black Polished Ware, as the name suggests, it was a polished pottery which was black polished, and it was typical of Mauryan period, which was found during Mauryan period only.
Okay.
It was a deluxe
pottery. What was the special feature?
It was a deluxe pottery.
Okay.
It was glossy, it was black, and it was special.
Okay.
So it was not used by the common people. Common people used the black, the red ware, and the grey ware.
We have call from Delhi. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is, like the administration of Chandragupta Maurya, what were the changes made in the administration by Ashoka?
Okay, as far as administration is concerned, we will have a detailed
separate lecture on it, maybe tomorrow or day after.
Day after tomorrow. So you just listen these lectures, we will
can
get
discuss
enlightened.
this question then.
So, we were talking about the special feature about the
No, but I still would like to answer her. You should, sir, as far as the administration is concerned, such informations generally we do not have at one place that what was the system introduced by Chandragupta Maurya and what were the changes made by Ashoka, because we generally discuss Mauryan administration and the sources mostly coming from Ashoka, period of Ashoka, which is talking about Mauryan administration. We generally try to rely on Kautilya's Arthashastra.
Okay.
Kautilya's Arthashastra, as we have already suggested, is basically a prescriptive text.
Okay. Everyone should read it.
Prescriptive from the point that what the king should do,
Okay.
how the rules should be made, how much tax should be collected, how should the officials behave with the people, how should people behave with the official.
Okay.
Now, whether these prescriptions were actually implemented into action or not, we have no source, no information to verify it.
Okay.
So that is why this problem is there with Kautilya's Arthashastra also, that it's prescriptive in nature. It's not descriptive. It does not say that the administration was like this. It says that administration should be like this, a state should be like this, a minister should be like this, a minister should have following qualities, a minister should do this, then he should do that, and then he should do that. Then we should have Samaharta, we should have a Sannidhata, Samaharta should do this and Sannidhata should do that. But whether that was done or not, we have no information.
Okay. Regarding that, we don't get information.
Because it's prescriptive in nature, it's not descriptive.
Okay. And the word like Samharta still we have in use some part of the country. For the collector they use. So, do we have another question? Okay. So, we were discussing the different aspects. So, what you would like to suggest to students to read some text so that they can get the idea of Mauryan Empire?
We generally at DU suggest our students to read books by Romila Thapar. One of her earliest books, Ashoka and Decline of the Mauryas, and then she later came out with a booklet called Mauryas Revisited. These two are basic readings. Apart from it, we suggest R.S. Sharma's books on all aspects of political ideas and institutions, and then on perspective in social and economic history of ancient India. These are basic readings.
Okay.
But if one wants to go into detail, one can see B.M. Barua and works of so many historians.
Okay. So, well friends, with these words we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf I thank Dr. O.P. Singh for giving such a wonderful lecture on this great topic. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow we will have further discussion on Mauryan Empire. I thank all of you again. Thank you very much.